This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second gen with the Odyssey and the Atari 2600, all the way up to Gen 7 with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Today's episode will be all about StarFox. With the recent announcement from Nintendo of a newish StarFox game, and I use air quotes when I say newish, coming to the Nintendo Switch next month in June, I wanted to reminisce about the StarFox games from the past and its arduous journey to try and stay relevant to the Nintendo brand. And what are the games to get? All right, enough talk. Let's get going.
Good luck.
Retro XP is part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, so be sure to check out patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast and check out every show the network has. There's tons of different variety types of shows like Resident Evil themed, Elden Ring, new games, old games, a little bit of everything. You can get access to the exclusive community Discord. There is a 30-day free trial, so if you want to try it out, check out the link. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at RetroX Podcast. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, obviously be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. And if you're listening to this, it's been a while since I posted an episode. I would say it's been a couple weeks, and I hope I'm not too rusty as I'm recording this, but that was due to the Midwest Gaming Classic knocking me back a week or so, as well as I was working on a pickups video for a whole week, I would say. And video making isn't necessarily my forte. I've got experience in it, and obviously I watch a lot of video game content creators, so there's a little bit of notes that I was taking, but it's on my it's up live on YouTube at RetroX Podcast. I just posted it last week. It's a pretty beefy video. It's about 45 minutes long because obviously, as you guys may have heard, I did pick up a lot of different games. I picked up a lot of Atari games, Master System games, a couple random games from like PlayStation 2, So there's a variety of different things that I picked up, and I go through all of it, and I talk about a lot of it. So let me know what you think of it. I'd like to do more videos like that, so I do want to improve. So definitely give me your feedback. All right, let's get started into the actual topic. So StarFox, the franchise itself, is a series of action games created by the Japanese game designer Shigeru Miyamoto, and it's been developed and published by Nintendo, at least some of them. The games generally follow StarFox combat team, and they're a combat team of anthropomorphic animals. And StarFox, obviously, or Fox McCloud, obviously, as you know, is a fox. Falco Lombardi, he's like a big falcon. Peppy Hare, which is a big rabbit, and Slippy Toad, which is a large toad. And these guys are led by Fox McCloud. Gameplay mostly involves missions around the Lilat planetary system, and it's set in basically primarily you're flying an R-Wing fighter spacecraft. In other vehicles as well, too. You can fight in some different other ones like tanks, submarines, bipedal robots, I don't know, and on foot in some of them. So I would say mostly in one of them, but mostly in two of them, I would say. But we'll get there when we get there. But the game hasn't seen many iterations in its lifespan. When you think about it, the game's been out for almost 30 years at this point, a little bit more than that. But they remain nonetheless iconic in Nintendo's library. In this episode, I won't talk about any of the characters' appearances in the Smash Brothers games, which I would say mostly if younger players, especially Gen Alpha and Gen Z that are playing Smash Brothers games, they know these characters from Smash Brothers, not realizing sometimes it's like, hey, they've been in games before, well before this. And, Smash Brothers games aren't really StarFox-focused games. StarFox and his team, though, did make an appearance as DLC in Ubisoft's game called Starlink: Battle for Atlas. And it was a multi-platform game, but Nintendo got very specific DLC that had StarFox in it. And that was the reason why I bought it. I played it a lot when it came out, and mostly because we were in such a drought of StarFox games. I was starved at the time. It came out in 2018, and I would say we had just come off of StarFox Zero at this time 2 years before. And it's like, okay, all right, well, this is the best StarFox game we're going to get for a while. And the premise of Starlink, or at least, StarFox's entry into this universe, is the team enters the Atlas system while on a mission to hunt down Wolf O'Donnell, who was the leader of Starwolf. And I'll talk a little bit more about who he is later on in the episode. But while doing so, they come across the Starlink Initiative in a battle against the Forgotten Legion, the former trying to receive an artifact stolen from the latter by Shahid, who's the main antagonist of the game itself. If I'm trying to remember correctly, it's been 8 years since I played this. Fox brings up the idea of helping the Starlink Initiative, and the team does so, despite Peppy just not wanting to be a part of it. Slippy then taps into the Starlink's Initiative intercom, startling Razor LeMay, who's one of the main characters in the game. And Fox introduces his team and states his purpose of helping them. Still confused, the team accepts them as a few extra pilots, more bodies to fight in the war, and they join the battle. Unfortunately, though, StarFox's R-Wings are disabled by an EMP blast, and they fall onto Curate, that's the planet, alongside the Starlink Initiative. Most, if not the entire game, though, takes place on the planet and utilizing the R-Wings, kind of like floating tanks. So there's no big space epic, dogfight battles or anything, but the game's fun enough if you're interested, if you have a Switch. And I think this game goes for pretty damn cheap. I mean, you could probably get it for a steal, if you find it at a used game store or something like that. Anyway, with that little detour out of the way, let's jump into the first game, StarFox on the SNES. And it's known as Starwing in PAL regions. It came out in 1993. It's a rail shooter game developed by Nintendo and Argonaut Software and published by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This is the first entry in the StarFox series, and the story kind of follows pilot Fox McCloud and his elite squadron of mercenaries known as the StarFox team. And they're defending their homeworld of Corneria against the invading forces of the malevolent scientists, Andros. And we have to start out by talking about Argonaut Software, since they pretty much designed all the tech that was used in this game, and they named it the Super FX chip. And founded as Argonaut Software by teenager Jez San in 1982, the company name is a play on his name, Jay San, and mythological story of Jason and the Argonauts. Its head offices were in Colindale, London, and later in the Argonaut House in Edgware, London. And in 1990, so crazy, like this kid's starting he's a teenager and he's starting his own video game company. Pretty cool. But in 1990, Argonaut collaborated with Nintendo during the early years of the NES and SNES. And a notable incident happened when Argonaut submitted a proof of concept method of defeating the Game Boy's copyright protection mechanism to Nintendo. So these guys jailbroke. Nintendo was pretty well known for making their systems bulletproof so they wouldn't get like unauthorized third-party software, but this guy did it. This guy broke through the copyright protection mechanism. So that got Nintendo's attention, and the combined efforts from Argonaut and Nintendo yielded a prototype of the game StarFox, which was initially codenamed SNES Glider, and it was inspired by its earlier Atari ST and Amiga game Star Glider. And Jez San had told Nintendo at the time that his team could only improve performance or functionality of this demonstration if Nintendo allowed Argonaut to design custom hardware to extend the SNES and have true 3D capability. Nintendo was like, all right, give it a shot. So San hired a few chip designers and made the Super FX chip. And they originally codenamed it the Mathematical Argonaut Rotation I&O, or Mario, as it's printed on the chip surface. It was so powerful, actually, the Super FX chip, and that a lot of guys joked that the Super NES was just a box, literally, to hold the chip. So it was like practically the game ran off the cartridge itself. So, I mean, when you see the game in action compared to all the other games that came out for the SNES, I mean, it's hard to argue against that. Some other notable games that the team made were Stunt Race FX and Vortex for the SNES. They made Croc Legend of the Gobos for the PlayStation, and they followed up with Croc 2, Alien Resurrection for the PlayStation, and I Ninja for the PS2. Unfortunately, the company went under in 2004, but in 2024, Jez actually reopened Argonaut as a boutique publisher that would focus on re-releasing and remastering Argonaut's existing franchises alongside the publication of third-party independent titles. And they released a remaster of Croc Legend of the Gobos that same year. I didn't look too much into if they're making anything more, if they have any other plans, but maybe after I'm done recording, I'll take a look. But Argonaut did much of the base programming for the game's engine, while the character designs and artwork were mainly done in-house by Nintendo. The main game design was done by Shigeru Miyamoto and Katsuya Eguchi. Characters were designed by Takeya Imamura, who I'm going to be mentioning his name quite a lot in this episode. And the music was composed by Hajime Hirasawa. Nintendo suggested the arcade-style shooting element of the game, and Argonaut brought the idea of using spaceships. And Shigeru Miyamoto cited the X-Wings from Star Wars as an inspiration for the R-Wings itself. And during this time, he was frequently visiting the Fushimi Inari Tashiya Shrine, which is about a 15-minute walk from the Nintendo corporate headquarters, and the Senbon Torii Gates there. And those locations inspired the idea of the gates that the player would need to pilot the ship through. There's a lot of different gates in the original game that you can kind of fly through, which is pretty cool. Miyamoto stated that he wanted the StarFox series to star animal characters, since he really wasn't interested in making a series with conventional science fiction stories with humans, robots, monsters, and superheroes. He decided to use a fox as a main character, since it reminded him of Fushimi Inari Taisha, that place that I talked about earlier. Miyamoto explained that he had always planned to use the English word fox instead of the Japanese word kitsune. Imamura used Japanese folklore as an inspiration to add a bird and a hare as two other protagonists, which is pretty cool. He also added a toad. The inspiration came from a staff member from Nintendo who used a toad as his personal mascot, actually. Funny. Imamura populated the Cornerian army with dogs and enemy army with monkeys, and made General Pepper a dog and Andros a monkey, which is pretty cool, since there is a Japanese expression about fighting like dogs and monkeys. Pretty cool. Miyamoto created several puppets and photographed them to use as artwork for the cover of the StarFox game, which is a very interesting looking cover. But it looks well. Doesn't look that bad. It's not like a Mega Man cover. Miyamoto was a fan of the British puppet dramas such as Thunderbirds, so he wanted the game cover to feature puppets. So pretty cool. Like I said, the game was released under the title Starwing in Europe, and the reason why it was released as Starwing instead of StarFox was there was a similarity of the title StarFox to the name of a German company called StarVox. So, might as well change it a little bit. Starwing isn't necessarily that bad. So, a couple of the original programmers that worked for Nintendo, Dylan Cuthbert and Giles Goddard, recalled, actually, and I remember watching a video interview where they talked about this. They recalled how when they moved to Kyoto to work in the Nintendo office, they were put in a room remotely located from the rest of Nintendo. Like, they were not allowed to interact or see anything of what Nintendo was working on. They were not full-time Nintendo employees, and Nintendo didn't want these guys to have access to any confidential or secret projects they were working on at the time. And they kind of discussed also how Miyamoto would come visit them every now and then, seeing what they were working on and, providing advice and feedback in between puffs of a cigarette. At this time, Miyamoto was a very notorious chain smoker. So, and of course, these were the times where, it was kind of par for the course where you could actually smoke inside. So, like I said earlier, third-person on-rail shooter. You're navigating an R-Wing through environments while various enemies, like spaceships, robots, creatures, would attack them. Along the way, throughout the levels, you can collect power-ups, that can boost your weapons, boost your bombs. At the end of each level, you can receive a score based on how many enemies have been destroyed and how well the player has defended their teammates, because each one of your teammates has their own shield bar. So you have to protect them every now and then. And of course, at the end of each level, there's a boss that the player must defeat before progressing to the next level. Of course, if you've played a video game before, you know this is generally par for the course. And control of the R-Wing includes like thrusters, so you can boost, you can, brake. You got rockets as well, bombs that you can shoot off. And, these little maneuvers, you can use them to, aid your benefit to help avoid enemies and also obstacles. You have a shield, and damage is incurred incrementally. The game also has a small degree of locational damage detection, which is really cool. So if you drag your wing across a wall or across a barrier or even on the ground, the ship's wings could clip against obstacles and actually could affect your flight trajectory. So, you may be leaning to the left or leaning to the right a little bit more than you'd want to, which is pretty cool. And also removes the ability to upgrade your lasers, your weapons. It's pretty neat at the time, pretty universal. So, as far as the story goes, the game takes place on a fictional planetary system called the Lilat system, which is inhabited by animal species, frogs, foxes, birds, rabbits, apes, and primarily contains the planets Corneria and Venom, and kind of like dichotomy of good versus evil. So Corneria being good, Venom being bad. Andros, who's the main antagonist here, is an evil mad scientist, has fled to the planet Venom after being banished from Corneria and decided to declare war on the latter, unleashing an enormous army to wreak havoc on the Lilat system. General Pepper, who's the dog that's giving you orders at this time, he's commanding officer of Corneria's defense force, dispatches a prototype high-performance fighter aircraft called the R-Wing. However, lacking in time to train pilots for the new aircraft, he summons the elite mercenary team StarFox to defeat Andros. And what's cool about the first game is you have 3 paths to take. It's not just level 1, level 2, level 3. There's 3 different paths. Each of these paths corresponds with a certain level of difficulty. So like some of them are a little bit longer, some of them are shorter. The longer ones obviously being a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging. 3 game paths all contain the planet Corneria as the first level and Venom as the last level, but they each have different versions depending on the path taken. So it's pretty cool. It's a little bit of a mix of everything, but the harder levels obviously have more planets and more spaces to play in. In some levels, you could play from a first-person perspective too, like the Asteroid and Space Armada levels. But and I remember playing. I had this game for the SNES when I got one, and just remember being blown away by how amazing this game looked. And I remember at the Space Armada levels, flying into the spaceships midway through the levels was so freaking awesome at the time. Like flying in close quarters, dodging platforms, and then just blowing your way out of it. This game was a friggin' technical marvel at the time. I couldn't believe I was playing a game like this. It was awesome. But now it's like you play it and it's like, well, that's kind of cool. But there are times in the game actually where your fellow pilots fly into view and get into trouble, or even are engaging enemies. They'll say like, help I'm in trouble, or get this guy off my tail, whatever. And they can ask for help, or, obviously they can yell at you for taking their kill. They can lose health and shields, so keep them with you for the most points gained at the end of each level. And if they die, they don't rejoin you for the rest of the game. So just be a good leader. Just be a good leader. And for the most part, there's just only a few stages, so you can knock this game out pretty quickly, less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes, if that. So the game did really well. Scored an average of 88% positive reception. Nintendo sold more than 1.7 million units in Japan and United States by the end of March 1993. It became the fastest selling video game launch in North America up until then, and sold 4 million copies within its first 5 years of release. And at that time, those aren't bad numbers. This was on par with a game you need for your Super Nintendo, alongside Super Mario World, Link to the Past, and StarFox. A whole whopping 4 years later, we got StarFox 64 for the Nintendo 64 in 1997, and a new piece of hardware to boot, the Rumble Pack. This game blew the doors off the hinges with fully voiced dialogue, full 3D effects, varied stages with different objectives, and even multiple different vehicles. So in 64, the player controls one of the vehicles piloted by Fox McCloud, usually, for the most part, in R-Wing. Most of the game takes place in what they now call it corridor mode in this game, which forces Fox's vehicle down an on-rails path. It's basically similar to what we expected in the original StarFox game. You could move around up and down, dodge obstacles, just like, what we expect. In addition to corridor mode, there is a new mode that we got in StarFox 64 called All Range mode. In this variant, the player can move freely in three-dimensional space within the confines of a large arena. And in the game, StarFox Fox McCloud will say, all right, all our wings in all range mode. And they'll, adjust the wings appropriately to make them be not necessarily fast, but a lot more maneuverable. The R-Wing can also perform a, U-turn to change direction. So obviously, if you want to go back the way you came, you can just pop a UE real quick. The R-Wing is also capable of deflecting enemy fire while performing a spinning maneuver called a barrel roll. So this is where we got the infamous do a barrel roll. And for you flight nerds out there, this is actually called an aileron roll. I don't know if you needed to know that, but you do now. Certain levels also put the player in a tank-like vehicle called the Landmaster, as well as a submarine named the Blue Marine on the planet Aquas. So only one level that you use the submarine in. Each vehicle shares some tactical characteristics with the R-Wing while providing its own unique gameplay elements. So the cool thing about this one is now with the power that is the Nintendo 64, we can have split-screen multiplayer for up to 4 players simultaneously. And at first, users can only play using the R-Wing in these multiplayer modes, but by earning certain medals in the main campaign, you can unlock the Landmaster tank and actually fight on foot as one of the 4 members of StarFox equipped with a bazooka or a rocket launcher. Multiplayer is the only place where players can use the Landmaster with upgraded lasers. You can't really upgrade the laser weapons during the campaign. And following the release of StarFox in 1993, series creator Shigeru Miyamoto began working on StarFox 2 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. If you're wondering why I skipped that, StarFox 2, I'm going to be talking about StarFox 2 a lot in this episode, and I'm not going to give it its due, unfortunately, because it really wasn't quite a finished game, but a lot of games were made with the DNA from StarFox 2. They brought in a lot of the ideas that they had. So by 1995, Miyamoto and his team had largely finished development of StarFox 2 before realizing that its release would require an upgraded Super FX2 chip. That would increase the cost of the game. Furthermore, newly launched competitor consoles, obviously we got the Sega Saturn at this time, and the Sony PlayStation, they possess processing power and graphics that dwarfed the SNES, as we know, which made StarFox 2 basically obsolete at that point by the time the game would release. Recognizing this, and that the Nintendo 64 would be pretty much launching the following year with increased power and processing, Miyamoto made the decision to cancel StarFox 2. And like I said, even though I don't talk about it, even though there never got an official release, we did see it come out on the Super NES Classic Edition, and you can download it onto the Nintendo Classic Surface if you have a Switch or a Switch 2 right now. Around this time, StarFox 64's development reportedly began with a series of experiments by character designer Takuya Imamura. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about him a lot, and programmer Kazuaki Morita. As Morita was new to 3D programming, creating something entirely new was difficult. They also didn't have the final N64 hardware itself to work with, which is kind of crazy because you guys are working for Nintendo, but you don't have the dev kit. So instead, they had to utilize a bulky development computer and a modified Super Nintendo controller without analog sticks. The actual system hardware was being used by the team working on Super Mario 64, which obviously, as we know, is considered to be a higher priority game. Star Fox is pale in comparison to the mighty Mario. The pair decided to begin development by porting the original Star Fox, which they thought would be better for easing into 3D. As this was Morita's first attempt at learning 3D, he began with inputting his own data and placing objects like cubes on a course and then launched basic-looking R-Wings, and they named this prototype Starbox. I don't know why, but it's the Starbox. That was it. That was what it was called at first. Imamura and Morita continued their experiments for 6 months, becoming attached to it and wanting to realize it as a commercial product, while actually the higher-ups in Nintendo just didn't care. They weren't enthusiastic about this project and were even waiting for the two to just give up on it eventually. But they didn't give up. All this would change when a game that would form into StarFox 64 was shown at the show Shinaki 1995. And this was apparently a Nintendo video game trade show that would happen yearly at this time. And I don't think it happens anymore, but this was big. They had displayed 10 seconds of promotional footage. And from there, Nintendo's like, let's go, let's do it. So director Takao Shimizu basically came on board after that to direct the game, and it was all guns blazing from there. So Miyamoto had 2 overall goals and themes for StarFox 64. The first was to create a more fleshed out StarFox game, and they weren't able to achieve a high enough processing speed for the original StarFox game because, obviously, of the hardware limitations. The other goal was to retain some of the best elements from the then canceled StarFox 2, not wanting all the development team's efforts to go to waste. As such, the development team, which was composed primarily of different staff members from those who worked on StarFox and StarFox 2, barring certain alumni, such as Miyamoto and Imamura, cribbed heavily from the work that had been done in those 2 games, with the former estimating roughly 60 to 64% of the concepts from the original game, and 30% from the canceled sequel. And the remaining 10% was original work done during development. I feel like I need to repeat that again. So 60% of the game was basically original concepts, original gameplay. 30% was kind of borrowed from the sequel, StarFox 2, that eventually got canceled. And the original remaining 10% was, basically original work done. So, yeah, I mean, the game is largely borrowed from the original games, to say. In particular, though, Miyamoto said that all-range mode, multiplayer mode, and the Star Wolf scenario came from StarFox 2. Star Wolf is become Star Fox's, basically, they're kind of the antithesis. They're, their main enemies, or their rivals, so to speak. In regards to the all-range mode, though, Morita reportedly worked on this aspect in secret, initially as an experiment, inspired by what he saw from StarFox 2. And the game's branching pathways were meant to act as kind of like a middle ground between the original Star Fox's static difficulty routes, where it's just one route that you pick, and also Star Fox 2's more freeform gameplay. 64 was also the first title to make use of the Rumble Pack peripheral, which came bundled with the game in some instances. I would say most instances. Miyamoto stated that the development team actually struggled to utilize the Rumble Pack in a way that players understood, noting that during development, players were often confused as to why their controller was vibrating. Like I said, the Rumble Pack mostly came packaged with the game itself. I didn't think there was a way to buy it individually, at least not that I remember. But, I mean, most of the time it was really cool to have that Rumble Pack. And it was something that none of us thought we needed. And this was the first time, really, that we experienced anything like this. So it was like, why do we need something like this? Why do I need my controller to rumble? Well, as we know now, it stuck. And it, nailed the landing to the point now where it's like commonplace that every game just has vibration. I don't even think about it. When my controller vibrates, it's just there. I don't even think about it, which is kind of cool, I guess. Interesting. So, as far as the story goes, you're on Corneria, of course, it's where you seem like you start all the time. The 4th planet of the Lilat system, the disgraced scientist Andros is exiled to Venom by General Pepper for nearly destroying the planet using biological weapons. Does this story sound familiar? 5 years later, Pepper detects suspicious activity on Venom, and Pepper hires the StarFox team, James McCloud, Peppy Hare, and Pigma Dengar, to investigate. Now, this is the original StarFox team. James McCloud is Fox McCloud's father. And Pigma Dengar, obviously, as we know, Pigma betrays the team. Andros captures James and kills him, while Pepe barely escapes from Venom alive. So 2 years after that, Andros launches an attack across the Lilat system. And defending Corneria, Pepper summons the new StarFox team, now consisting of Fox McCloud, who's James's son, Pepe, who's now his mentor, and Fox's friends Falco Lombardi and Slippy Toad, the new members of the team. Now, I wouldn't call Falco a friend. He's more like, kind of like I mean, they're kind of rivals, I guess, so to speak. Obviously, same objectives, but just still, very much get out of my way kind of friends. While traveling through several planets, the team battle with Andros' henchmen. Obviously, they battle through against Starwolf all the time. And like I said, this game, even, telling you about the story, it's almost a retelling of the original story, just of, the original SNES game, just a lot more fleshed out. And I talked about how this has branching level system, in which more difficult paths are unlocked by completing certain objectives in each level. So players can also change paths once the current mission is accomplished. All the game's possible routes obviously start at Canaria, eventually put the player in contact with the Starwolf team, and end at Venom to confront Andros. And the replayability of this game was so awesome at the time because, it was short. You could beat this game in an hour. You have multiple levels in the Galaxy system that you completely bypass, requiring multiple playthroughs. So you look at the map and you're like, hey, how do I get to those areas? Hey, how do I get through that area? So getting a guide at the time was your best bet to know what triggers during the levels were required to unlock certain areas in the Lilat system. And this was critically reviewed as one of the best games on the N64 and honestly still holds up to this day. I still come back and play it. It's probably one of the most replayed games I have on my N64. I got quite a few N64 games, but I always seem to go back to this one more often than anything else. Sold above 1 million units in the United States by the end of 97, and it was one of 5 Nintendo 64 games to do so. We got a remaster of Star Fox 64 on the Nintendo 3DS in 2011. Awesome 3D effects to boot. The original 3DSs had pretty bad 3D tracking, like you had to hold the 3DS in such a position in order to experience the 3D effect. So playing this on the new 3DS with the eye tracking tech was almost necessary to utilize the hardware to its full extent. And of course, now with the announcement of StarFox for the Nintendo Switch, we're seeing a full-on remake of this title with more cutscenes, voiceovers, expanded levels, more multiplayer modes, and obviously there's so much more. And now for something completely different, Star Fox Adventures for the Nintendo GameCube. The game originated from 2 separate projects that were originally in production for the Nintendo 64. It was going to be a proposed action-adventure sequel to Star Fox 64 that was in development at Nintendo, and Dinosaur Planet, which was an original property created by Rare that began development in 1997. Nintendo producer Shigeru Miyamoto convinced Rare to merge the 2 projects, with Star Fox characters and gameplay elements being implemented into the world of Dinosaur Planet. Development was moved forward 1 hardware generation to the GameCube, which ending work on Nintendo 64. So Star Fox creator Takaya Imamura, he still felt this attachment to this series, and he had requested Miyamoto to let him produce a sequel. Miyamoto said, okay, but I want the game to be an action-adventure title, which was foregoing the series' usual 3D rail shooter gameplay. Imamura, as well as programmer Morita, began experimenting with various ideas for what was to be called Star Fox Adventures, such as Fox running around on foot, shooting down enemies with a gun. However, progress in the project stalled due to it being a late-stage Nintendo 64 title, and much of the staff being pulled away to work on bigger projects such as Mario, Legend of Zelda games, and then obviously games for the upcoming GameCube at this time. So the Dinosaur Planet demo for the N64 caught Miyamoto's attention, noticing the striking similarities between Rare's designs of Saber, who was the original main protagonist in the game, and Nintendo's Fox McCloud. So just prior to E3 in 2000, Nintendo asked Rare to keep discussion of Dinosaur Planet quiet and arranged a meeting with Rare to see about a marriage of Dinosaur Planet and their StarFox Adventures concept during the event. The two companies agreed to the idea of StarFox Adventures and Dinosaur Planet as a Nintendo 64 game. So it was supposed to be called StarFox Adventures Dinosaur Planet, which was, man, that would have been a weird name. And they would be maintaining as much of Rare's work as possible. Rare devs Kevin Bayless, Phil Tossell, and Lee Schuneman later met with Nintendo in Japan in the weeks that followed to further discuss how to merge the properties, such as bringing Fox McCloud and the other StarFox characters into the game, adjusting the art style of the other characters of Dinosaur Planet to match, and also developing a story that fits in the StarFox canon. So the team later realized the potential of using the StarFox license in hopes of boosting awareness and switch development from the Nintendo 64 to the GameCube, targeting release as a launch game for the console. Saber was dropped in favor of Fox McCloud as the lead, but the game still retains certain original Dinosaur Planet characters such as Crystal and Tricky. OG fans will know who Crystal is. Rare staff had originally considered removing Crystal in transition from Dinosaur Planet, but Nintendo, specifically Takeya Imamura, who had been brought on as the supervisor and producer for the project, requested for her to remain in the game, feeling it would be a waste to scrap her. Imamura assisted in illustrating her final design during his visits at Rare, which was a much more sexualized and revealing look than her original Dinosaur Planet appearance. According to Imamura, he and Miyamoto were looking to add, quote, sex appeal to the StarFox franchise, as Miyamoto wanted the series to have mature elements where possible. Oh, man. This was the time when Nintendo wanted to kind of be a little bit more mature. And I want to say this is where furries were born. Anyway, moving on. StarFox Adventures was released on September 23rd, 2002, as Rare's only GameCube game, and as the final game that the company developed for a Nintendo home console before they were acquired by Microsoft the day after the game's release in the United States. That's wild. StarFox Adventures is played from a third-person perspective with full camera control in most areas, and the ability to use a first-person perspective for looking around a location. The game supports a widescreen aspect ratio, which is nice, and it focuses on two different styles of gameplay, which the player switches between at various points. So the first gameplay style is Adventure Mode, which is pretty much the main mode, what you're going to be playing most of the time, and operates this is pretty much like a Legend of Zelda game, especially Ocarina of Time. In this mode, players control the game's protagonists as they explore 13 different locations on foot. You're climbing, you're jumping, you're moving from, cave to cave, big area to big area, each of which unlocks when a player completes a specific task or acquires a new skill in order to progress the story. And some of the gameplay mechanics are similar in fashion to those Zelda games if you played this before. Adventures does have a form of currency called scarabs, so you pick up these kind of beetle-looking scarabs, and you can use them to purchase healing items. There's a store in the main hub area where you can purchase healing items, new equipment, maps of the various locations, and so many other different little things that you need to access certain areas, like the warp stone, for example. Nobody brings me gifts anymore. Sorry if that triggered you, but you buy them rock candy or something like that you have to buy at the store. So very interesting. So the character climbs ladders, ledges, swims, jumps between platforms. So you can't really manually jump. You have to it's one of those old school game mechanics where you run to the edge and you just automatically jump. So the game features a day and night phase, actually. However, this isn't like the Legend of Zelda games. It kind of just flows in as we go. And unfortunately, much of the game's interactivity is locked when it's nighttime because all the NPCs that you see all of a sudden go to sleep. So the main character comes equipped with a staff after the initial stages of the game. You can use it as a weapon mostly and a tool for exploration and puzzle solving. Like I said, combat is melee oriented. When you get ambushed by enemies, one locks onto you, and then you can basically dodge. Then you can also just spam attacking them with your staff. As a tool, the staff can be used to open containers, operate mechanisms, lift up stones, to uncover hidden caves and boulders to find items like scarabs, especially. As the player progresses in the story, the staff can be upgraded, so that's pretty cool. However, using the powers that the staff has requires magic energy, which, of course, the player can recover by retrieving special crystals in the environment. And then, obviously, you have a sidekick that you can have with you throughout the game, and one sidekick in particular, Prince Tricky, you have to feed him mushrooms in order for him to do things for you, and he gets hungry a lot. So this is not your typical StarFox game. Not what you'd expect. The second style of gameplay is R-Wing mode and functions in a similar manner to other games in the StarFox series. In this mode, the player decides where on Dinosaur Planet they wish to go, and at the beginning of the game, the planet itself, the game's overworld, is only accessible, but unlocking a planet segment during the adventure mode, the player gains access to traveling there via R-Wing. And these are such easy modes. Players must fly through a set number of gold rings, and 10 usually, and they'll need to fly through them at certain areas to reach later areas. I mean, this is basically, I think they just filled this in to be like, okay, let's just throw in some StarFox elements, and it really isn't that challenging or complicated. It really isn't. So as far as the story goes, 8 years after StarFox 64, Crystal, who's a new character in the series and one that will return later, investigates the destruction of her home planet, Serenia, and the death of her parents. She receives a distress call from the Krozoa Palace, and she discovers that it was attacked by General Scales and the Sharp Claw Army. It's really cool because there's a very unique language that they use in this game for the Serenia people, or at least the Serenia population. She's persuaded by a wounded Earthwalker, who's just a large Triceratops, in the palace to collect the Krozoa spirits and return them to the palace, which would supposedly tilt the war in the dinosaurs' favor and stop Scales. After releasing the first one, however, a mysterious being sends Crystal into the spirit's path, trapping her in a floating crystal atop the palace until all the spirits can be returned. Interesting. Meanwhile, General Pepper contacts StarFox team in the edges of the Lylat system, asking them to investigate the invasion of the dinosaur planet. Since the team are desperate for money and maintenance at the time, they're kind of like talking to each other like, we need money. The team leader, Fox McCloud, agrees to take a look, arriving unarmed at Pepper's request to avoid trouble with the locals. On the planet's surface, Fox obtains and wields the magic staff, which Crystal lost earlier. She lost it. It fell down a chasm, but Fox just happens to land where it dropped. So he learns from the queen of the Earthwalker tribe that Scales stole 4 spellstones from the planet's 2 Force Point temples, resolving to prevent the planet from breaking up further and restore it to its original unity. Fox travels the planet and retrieves the stones to the temples with the help of the queen's son, Prince Tricky. Now, this is definitely an interesting game. I didn't play this game when it first came out because I was like, this isn't a StarFox game to me. I wanted a traditional StarFox game. And when they announced StarFox for the Switch 2, I was like, now I want to play an old StarFox game. And this was, for some reason, the first game that popped in my mind. And I was like, I've never played this game. I always wanted to. Now I want to give it a chance. I want to give it a shot. And honestly, it's a fun adventure game. Great level design, great combat, pretty likable, goofy characters, endearing. And it's not the hardest game out there. It's quite easy, if I may say so. I'm not doing that to knock it at all, but it's fun. And I'm glad I gave it a chance. It's a really good time. So at the time, like I said, I didn't want this kind of game. I wanted an actual traditional StarFox game. And fear not, because 3 years after this game, we got StarFox Assault for the GameCube. And that's crazy. 2 StarFox games in one system generation. We've never seen that ever, even now. So this game is set 1 year after the events of StarFox Adventures and follows Fox McCloud and his team attempting to save the Lylat system from cybernetic insectoid race known as the Aparoid. It contains a lot of good music, orchestral arrangements from StarFox 64, as well as original tracks specifically created for this game. And there's 3 gameplay types in this. There's R-Wing, flights, same with all-range mode and just like on-rail shooters. There's a Landmaster tank modes, and you can be on foot. And all these modes you can play in multiplayer as well. However, they're specifically locked to certain maps. So, and obviously the R-Wing missions are similar to those in the first 2 games. And in previous games, main characters Falco, Slippy, and now Crystal is here, because I think Peppy's taken more of a overseer route where he's not piloting anymore. So we got Crystal coming in now. You can occasionally call them for help when chased by enemies, and then also they need your help too as well. So you got to keep them alive. If their shield gauge is depleted, they will just retreat. Against bosses, Slippy can show their health bar by analyzing them, while Crystal can actually spot their weak points. Crystal has this special like psychic ability that kind of helps you out a lot. In R-Wing only missions, if Fox has rescued his teammates, they will return the favor later on with cool items and stuff. Like Slippy and Crystal will grant him silver rings to replenish his shield gauge, while Falco will pass him smart bombs. That's so Falco. So obviously there's so many other different mission completion abilities, like obviously completing a mission without a teammate retreating will grant an ally medal. So while in the Landmaster, though, the player has complete freedom to move about the level, and they are free to shoot or run over enemies and assist their wingmates when necessary. So you'll be on the Landmaster, and they'll be up above in the skies trying to help out a little bit by taking out some of the other aircraft. Playing on foot essentially turns the game into a 3D third-person run-and-gun game, and most of the time you're inside for a lot of these levels. You can start with a standard blaster gun. You can acquire a variety of other weapons. So the game supports multiplayer for up to 4 players simultaneously. It starts off very limited, only a few playable characters, weapons, items, and it's mostly just dogfighting modes, so nothing really too spectacular. So as far as the story goes, 1 year after the death of his uncle Andros by Fox, Andrew assumes leadership of the planet Venom's remaining troops under the alias of Oikonoi. Oikoni. Yeah, Oikoni. I can never say that right, even when I'm reading it. And he begins a rebellion. So this happens pretty quickly after. I wonder in the timeline if this comes before Adventures. No, that can't be. No, that can't be right, because Crystal's here. I should have done the research on this one. So, General Pepper orders an attack on Oikoni's forces, hiring the StarFox team to assist the Cornerian army. During the battle, though, his flagship is destroyed by a robotic insectoid creature, which attacks the StarFox team. It is quite an interesting mission where it's like you're fighting one thing, and then all of a sudden some other enemy comes in and just ruins everybody's day. After Fox destroys the creature, he recovers a damaged core memory unit and turns it over to Slippy's father, Beltino, for research. And this is the first time we get to see a family member of someone. So Slippy's father, Beltino, basically is just this awesome, very well-known engineer at the time. He explains the creature is a member of a race of cybernetic insectoids called Aparoids, one of which ravaged the Cornerian fleet 17 years prior. And I think Beltino was actually part of the fleet during that time. Fearing an invasion, Beltino asked StarFox team to recover an undamaged core memory so that they might find a way to stop the Aparoids. So development of this game was a little rough. It took a little bit longer than I think was initially anticipated. And Star Fox Assault was meant to be a return to the series' roots, especially after Star Fox Adventures was like a notable departure from what we knew to be a Star Fox game. So according to Star Fox series creator Imamura, Miyamoto had requested prior to the development that he wanted to see a Star Fox game that was cooler and slicker than ever before. The game's development unusually began with multiplayer battle mode. That's what they started out making. Imamura desired to improve upon the battle mode that was present in Star Fox 64, which was kind of like put in as like a last minute bonus. So Namco handed Nintendo a handful of planning documents titled Vehicle Swapping War Action Game. And it was decided that this concept of being able to change freely between vehicles such as the R-Wings and Landmasters would be the starting point for Assault's development. And reportedly, the development team had put much of their effort and resources into the battle mode and even questioned creating a single-player mode at all, explaining why the game's initial reveal trailer in E3 2003 exclusively focused on the multiplayer. And at this time, according to Electronic Gaming Monthly, this particular video was just booed by reviewers and viewers itself. Like, they didn't want this. EGM said it itself. It was remarkably unimpressive. In the end, the developers felt that the fans would want a proper story mode, similar to the ones present in previous StarFox games. I mean, duh. Like, I'm pretty sure most people that played StarFox at the time, especially myself, were just there for the campaign modes. The multiplayer modes and the battle modes were cool, don't get me wrong, but I mean, single player all the way. Like, that's what brings people to your game initially. So then at this time, it was decided to press on and create one. Oh, darn. This is reportedly a factor into why the game received multiple delays. It was also decided to forego the series' tradition of including branching pathways, so this was more of a straight linear game, instead deciding to put effort into including more volume and strategic possibility into a single stage, each that would also now include checkpoints. Thus, from the perspective of developers, negating the need for branching paths as seen in StarFox 64, so the levels are a little bit longer now in this, and there's a lot more variety in your combat. So obviously there's the one level, I think the second or third level, where you play as you're piloting a landmaster, you're infiltrating a base, then you hop out of that landmaster, and then you go into the base itself, go back into the landmaster, and you keep doing it, rinse and repeat. So a little bit more variety. At E3 2004, EGM, the same magazine that poorly wrote about it a year before, wrote up a follow-up that said the game looked much better than a year ago. Assault was then scheduled for November 2004 release, but then, of course, was delayed to the next year. So overall, the game's narrative was handled by Namco, with the concept of the Aperoids, in particular being conceived by Kobayashi, who was one of the original developers at Namco, something of a tribute to the Galaxian series. However, Nintendo staff, particularly Imamura, would also provide requests and inputs on how the StarFox characters and world would be portrayed. I mean, it is their IP after all. For example, the inclusion of a new female pilot, Crystal, who we obviously met in Adventures, was requested by Nintendo. And according to him, this was partially because he wanted players to see the characters grow and evolve over the course of the series, and thus there was a desire to acknowledge adventures in the lore itself, in the canon, despite it being considered to be something of a side story within the StarFox series. So it may not be considered serious by some StarFox fans, but it's what we got. And like I said, it's good. It's a good game. The development team were reportedly split, actually, on how Crystal would be portrayed, with one side wanting her to be kind of like a motherly role, and those who wanted her to be more of a big sister type. And it was also Imamura's call to feature Beltino Toad in here as a director of research for the Cornerian army, who, like I said earlier, fought against the Aperoids 17 years ago. So this game would get pretty average reviews, with most reviews lambasting the other game modes that weren't as polished as the R-Wing segments, like sloppy control schemes. And honestly, I mean, I can see the point in that. The R-Wing levels were just so well tuned, so well dialed in. They were so much fun. And then, it almost like kind of the gameplay almost slowed down when you got to the Landmaster or even the on-foot segments. I'm not a fan of the on-foot segments because of I don't know. It's just, it doesn't seem authentic enough, and it's very simplistic in nature, if that makes sense. And not to say that it's bad. It provided a definite needed variety in the StarFox formula, but obviously the R-Wing segments are going to be my favorite no matter what. But yeah, and of course, as we know, the R-Wing segments are the best, polished so well, and Namco knows how to make fighter plane style games. Since they were killing it with Ace Combat games at the time, and continued to do so for many years. So shortly after this, we got Star Fox Command for the Nintendo DS in 2006, which was taking place a year after Assault, and the canon itself. And the game has two types of single-player gameplay, which includes a strategic map and a battle mode. The overworld-like map mode is where the player takes command of several ships, and this mode usually gets ships into the battle mode, and essentially a simple turn-based strategy game. So eventually, after you position your ships, then you engage in the battle mode. Up to 4 ships can be maneuvered at a time, and the objective of the mode is to prevent the enemies from reaching the Great Fox, your main battleship. It also allows players to fire missiles from the Great Fox that they have picked up from exploring in this mode or from meeting certain conditions in the battle mode. When a craft that is controlled by the player encounters an enemy group or missile in this mode, the gameplay switches to the battle mode. So, kind of a very, very unique gameplay design. Not one I would expect from StarFox. And battle mode, obviously, is similar to all range mode, as we've seen in the previous titles. And once that battle mode is completed, the game returns to the map mode. As players progress through the game, they can choose different routes upon completing certain levels, and each route has its own character dialogue to accompany it. And players are able to visit different planets depending on which routes they choose, as we've seen before. However, the game features 9 different endings altogether, and gamers can access all of them by playing the game multiple times, selecting different routes each time. And instead of kind of giving different perspectives on what happens to the StarFox team, where it's just like a boilerplate, this is where this person goes, this is what happens to that person. The characters go in various directions depending on what ending is watched. And StarFox Command, the game itself, doesn't feature traditional voice acting. It puts out that gibberish that we knew from the original SNES version. And which is what's cool in the DS version that we got. You can use the built-in DS microphone where your voice is converted into the garbled speech of the various characters, which is kind of cool. Not one that maybe some people used it. I never played this game when it came out. So, StarFox Command was co-developed by Q Games and directed by its founder, Dylan Cuthbert, who we remember from the original StarFox game. So, he was approached by Shigeru Miyamoto, who suggested that they do a concept demo for StarFox for the up-and-coming DS at the time, which led the team spending a couple of months creating kind of like a space elevator demo style after the original StarFox. And they also had massively revamped the look of the characters in the team, kind of being more anime styled, a little bit more cartoony, but this direction was dropped when the game entered full production. And Imamura was assigned to produce the title once again. According to Cuthbert, Miyamoto approached him and his company because he wanted to see more of the ideas from the unreleased StarFox 2 game, such as its strategy game elements explored and applied to the Nintendo DS with its 2 screens, as he viewed the Fox IP as an avenue to explore new ideas in 3D gaming, as opposed to just relying on a consistent formula, and thus encouraged the team to try out various new ideas and just to see what happens. So, for example, Cuthbert wanted to include more traditional rail shooter stages in the game designs, similar to the stages present in previous games, such as, the original and 64. But Miyamoto was adamant that the team stuck with free-range stages, the all-range mode, desiring to take the project elsewhere, as opposed to just copying the original games. Imamura had originally tended on creating a single linear narrative, somewhat similar to the, previous games, especially Star Fox Assault, but Cuthbert would ultimately convince him to turn it into a larger, branching storyline with multiple pathways and endings. One of those endings actually had Fox leaving the team and live a peaceful life with Crystal. So interestingly enough, StarFox Command is the first StarFox title to incorporate online multiplayer. While the team investigated the possibility of utilizing the game's strategy gameplay elements in the multiplayer mode, it was ultimately decided early on to just incorporate only dogfighting. God, that would have been so hard to do. As they were looking for something that was simple, easy to pick up and play. And of course, everybody loved the dogfights in Star Fox 64. So the story of this game is a few years after the self-destruction of the Aperoid race, which we saw in Star Fox Assault. The Star Fox team had pretty much all disbanded. Peppy had succeeded General Pepper as commander of the Cornerian army. Falco became an independent mercenary. Slippy had retired from active flying to spend time with his fiancée Amanda. And lastly, Crystal had joined the Starwolf team after breaking up with Fox. So it sounds like they had a relationship, but it did not go so well. While patrolling the galaxy with Rob-64, who was the main robot assistant for the team, Fox learned of the appearance of the Anglars, a race of aquatic alien that had been bioengineered by Andros and living beneath the acidic seas on the planet Venom. Damn Andros. Led by the Anglar Emperor, the army began waging war across the Lylat system, taking control of most of its planets. Learning that the Anglars are now attacking Corneria, Fox rushes to battle the invaders. And from this point, there are multiple paths the story can take. And I alluded to this earlier, where depending on how you interact with the game and how you interact with your characters in the game determines the paths. The player is initially forced to follow a specific linear progression in the beginning. Reaching the game's ending for the first time will unlock the ability to access these alternate routes when replaying the game. The player is able to select Fox's actions through dialogue choices, which affect the progression of stages, the characters that appear, and the events of the story itself. So like I said, there are 9 possible endings, each of which reveal a possible future for all the characters. And I never played this game. However, I do have it. I have it in my collection. And after actually researching this game and finding out what it's about, I think I want to give it a shot. It sounds quite interesting. And it actually got pretty average reviews. Nothing spectacular, but hovering over the 70 out of 100s. So, lastly, we got 2 games bundled together on the Wii U. Remember the Wii U? StarFox Zero and StarFox Guard in 2016. This isn't necessarily retro, but because I think I said 15 years is kind of like the retro era that I'm thinking of. But I mean, we're talking about StarFox, so we got to mention it. This came out 10 years after StarFox Command, and StarFox had skipped the Wii generation entirely, similar to how they skipped, how we skipped the Switch generation too recently. So StarFox Zero is a 3D rail shooter, largely focuses on gameplay of its predecessors. Pretty much not necessarily a remake of Star Fox 64, but damn is it pretty close. It's just like a kind of like a best of, like a greatest hits collection, if that makes sense. The game is controlled using the Wii U gamepad. You cannot use the regular controller for this game, which is unfortunate because that's a really good controller. The left control stick used to maneuver the craft, while gyroscopic controls can be used to aim weapons, and you cannot disable the gyro controls, by the way. You can alter the way it functions, but you cannot disable it. A cockpit view is displayed on the second screen to assist with aiming, which is kind of nice. The minus button on the gamepad can be used to swap the 2 displays at the same time, so if you prefer to aim on the TV screen, you can. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I don't know why you'd want to do either way. I don't know. This is a weird game. This is a really weird game. Some interesting ideas. So some of the game's vehicles can transform into certain other vehicles and situations. Like the R-Wing can transform into a bipedal walker, which was another function that came from the unreleased Star Fox 2 game that lets players freely walk around the platforms and in enclosed spaces. The Landmaster tank can transform into the Gravmaster, which can perform extended aerial maneuvers for a short time. And then they had the Gyro Ring, which is a drone-like helicopter that can lower a small robot called Direct Eye that can enter small spaces, hack into computers, or latch onto explosive cubes that can be dropped onto enemies. Really cool. The game's development began at this time with experimentation on leftover assets from a never-released Star Fox game for the Wii that they had been working on by a small group since about 2008. And the Wii project never took form because, in the words of Miyamoto, the team could just not come up with enough compelling new ideas for it. You don't have to come up with anything new. Just come up with something good. Like, I just don't understand why they think like they got to be so unique. Sometimes Nintendo, man. I don't know. So Miyamoto stated that the game's main storyline and overall presentation were structured episodically, taking inspiration from 1960s television like Thunderbirds, which we've talked about that before, with the main missions featuring traditional Star Fox gameplay acting as like primetime programming, while side missions featured more quirky, experimental gameplay mechanics, and that acted as like late night programming. I'm using quotes. I know you can't see that. Yusuke Hashimoto of Platinum Games is the main developer of this game, said that they were approached by Nintendo about co-developing the game after they requested Nintendo to add a R-Wing themed bonus level to Bayonetta 2 at this time. Hideki Kamiya of Platinum Games had also previously expressed his desire for Nintendo to approach them about developing a new Star Fox game. According to Nintendo, the story of Zero is neither a prequel or a sequel to previous Star Fox games. If you call the game having a story to begin with, is like I said, it's just like a greatest hits collection. So this game was yet another remake of 64, Star Fox 64, as well as some levels from the original title for the SNES as well. Of course, Platinum Games added extra missions in these locations, like I mentioned earlier, but largely overall, it was a retelling of the original games once again. Is this like the third remake? Kind of? Yeah. The game's reviews are quite mixed. Honestly, I would say most people were kind of more negative on it, mostly because of the fact that the gyro controls were not an optional control scheme. It made the game very challenging to play for many, myself included. Miyamoto, though, was insistent on keeping them in the game and I think it was his way of trying to convince players how awesome the Wii Pad's functionality was at the time. And I got to tell you, Miyamoto, it didn't work. Obviously, I'm pretty sure they knew that because the Wii U did not work in general. And most reviewers hated it. Actually, with one reviewer just not being able to give a final score of the game because he couldn't bring himself to finish it on account of the frustrating controls. The pad was beneficial to providing two screens for gameplay, but it made it challenging going back and forth, up and down between your TV and your Wii Pad. Not necessarily a way that I think most people wanted to play games at the time. So, which, I mean, it's unfortunate because they had good bones. I mean, it's Platinum Games. They make good games. But, man, if they just didn't have those gyro controls. Platinum Games did offer up a suggestion to say they could port this to the Switch. If done right, they would have to just massively restructure the game. It'd be cool if they did. Actually, it wouldn't be too late. I think they could pull it off. Packaged with this game, if you bought it physical, was Star Fox Guard, a 3D tower defense game in which players must protect various bases owned by Slippy Toad's uncle, Grippy, from oncoming attackers by monitoring security cameras. The television displays footage from all the available security cameras, while the Wii U gamepad features an overhead view of the base. To defend the base's core, players must watch the monitors carefully for any oncoming attackers and switch control to one of the available cameras on your Wii Pad in order to fire its weapon. And enemies, there's combat robots, which must be all defeated in order to progress, and chaos robots, which hinder the player by tampering with the cameras, such as obscuring the view or showing fake footage. There's 100 missions in this game, and then there's an editor mode that allows players to edit the behavior of enemies and levels and share them online. You can also, besides this coming in a physical copy, you can also download this on the Wii Shop. Well, I mean, you could. The Wii Shop is closed now at this point, but the game was fine. Nothing special. It was a pretty bland experience, and as most reviewers said, and offered nothing to the overall lore of the franchise. I think it was just a tech demo, so to speak. Graphically, it wasn't much to look at either. And for me, I think I played it for a few minutes, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and I just put it back on the shelf. And that's it. That's it for the series up until now. I mean, this is a longer episode than the one I'm used to, but I basically went through the whole entire Star Fox franchise over 30 years, well over 30 years. One can argue against Nintendo that what they've done with the franchise has been bare minimum, at least. They've retold the story of Star Fox multiple times, with only a few original stories sprinkled into the franchise, like Star Fox Adventures, Assault, and Command. Nonetheless, each game brought something new to the franchise with some pretty innovative gameplay, new characters sprinkled in, returning ones that just kind of kept growing with the universe. Unique storytelling, branching paths was a really cool option, and multiple different endings for especially one of them. However, over time, just fans wanted more. They wanted more Star Fox. It's, technically been 10 years since Star Fox Zero, with Fox McCloud and his team skipping over the Switch's life cycle, which the Switch was a slam dunk. It was a success for Nintendo. You think they'd want to keep going with this. And they previously skipped over the Wii. Nintendo has these franchises that appease the hardcore audiences, like Metroid, F-Zero, and others that, they always kind of talk about, like, we don't know what to do with it. You don't need to make anything unique. You don't need to make anything, super quirky. Just make a good game like everybody else does. It's not it's complicated, Don't get me wrong. I'm not a video game developer. I don't know fully the breadth of what it takes to make a video game, but you can make something good. You're Nintendo. You can do that. And many of the games made for the StarFox franchise were actually, funny enough, made by non-Nintendo developers, Rare, Platinum Games, and Namco. And same with the last F-Zero game we got from the game. That's how long it's been since a F-Zero game is the GameCube. And I'm not counting F-Zero 99. F-Zero for the GameCube was made by Sega. But, I mean, of course, Nintendo knows what to do with Mario and Zelda franchises, though. And Pokemon, of course. Regardless, though, in my opinion, StarFox is one of my favorite franchises for the Nintendo systems. I'm not much of a Mario guy, personally. I'd rather cut my teeth on StarFox 64 than Mario 64 if I ever want to fire up my Nintendo 64. And while I didn't care for Super Mario Sunshine at all on the GameCube, I thoroughly enjoyed Assault. And right now, currently enjoying Adventures. And a must-have for your Nintendo 3DS is StarFox 64 3D as well. It looks really good. The fast-paced combat are what really brings me back. The R-wing segments, the on-rail shooters. The stories are simple, but the gameplay is really what brings me in. That the shooter combat is so much fun, so engaging, provides enough challenge that gets you not only extra items and weapons, but extra sections on the map, which is really cool. There's so many examples during the games where you perform certain acrobatic moves, or even saving your comrades, hitting a certain amount of enemies to reveal certain areas, new areas, branching paths, even like different bosses. I mean, there's even possibilities of failing certain missions, like in StarFox 64, that you can unlock different areas in the system if you succeed or even if you fail. So it's really cool. So, I mean, I always enjoy going back to these games, and I'm telling you, I'm very much looking forward to the Switch 2 version coming out this June. So I'll probably talk about it more when it comes out, and just kind of let you know if you've been an old school StarFox fan, if it's worth getting. I would recommend getting a Switch 2 before the price jumps $50 in a couple months. So yeah, well, that's it. Thanks, guys.